Welcome back to the lab. Right, content starts immediately. It's in the back of our 69 Nissan Gloria that we're putting the Ford 9-inch diff and all that stuff in. We've got these speed bumps, speed bulges, power bulges, suspension arm bulges. We've got these contraptions for the upper links on the rear suspension. And obviously that interferes with how the rear seat goes into the car. So the actual seat back has had a slight tweak. And just double checking before I say it does fit perfectly. It fits perfectly now. In fact, there's a couple of tabs down the bottom here. You'll see those. That's very, very close to going on there. You just give it a bit of a push and you put the bolt in and you're good. So that part's good. However, the seat base, which is in rather poor condition, that's what all this powder is on the floor here. That's the foam falling to pieces inside the seat. But I'm not an upholsterer, so that's not something I'm going to tackle. I'm going to deal with the frame that doesn't fit in the car. So let's have a look at what we're going to do there. Obviously this has been test fitted in the car, and I've measured out the areas that the suspension is fouling with the seat. There's a frame at the back here. It's quite thick. You'll see that. Let's call that 25 millimeters thick. That's the area that the seat frame clashes with the suspension arms. So basically we'll just take that piece out and leave it a little bit at the top so it holds it together. All these clips along here, I'm going to undo all those, peel the back of the seat cover away, remove that section of the frame that's fouling, and then just leave this steel rod and seat cover to do whatever it likes to make things work. Basically we'll undo it, chop those pieces out until such time as we can make it fit. Yes, if you put an exceptionally heavy person in that seat, they may bottom out their arse, excuse the French, on that suspension component in this general area back here. But there really isn't a lot we can do without making a complete custom seat base. That's something the owner's going to have to deal with, you know. We wanted to put all this big stuff in this old car. Sometimes there's compromises to be made. Right, so I'll get those clips under and show you where I'm at. Okay, so without that cover clipped in the back just yet, bit of a test fit there. Seat fits in the car, right? So, and I can sit in there. If you sit with your bum right towards the back and bounce up and down, definitely you can feel where those suspension components are. If you slouch a little bit so your bum's more towards the front, it's absolutely fine. So I think that's a pretty good compromise for what's going on for 20 minutes work on a seat where really the seat's getting in pretty poor shape. So if we want to go for perfection, it would involve a lot of work, like basically rebuilding the whole seat. So I'm pretty sure that'll be okay. I'll talk with the customer and ensure he's happy with that. Not a lot of leg room in the back if the front seats are all the way back, so I guess that is quite a long way back from where it would normally sit, right? So driver's side not so bad, and there's heaps more room. Alright, I'll get on with something else, but that'll do the trick, I reckon. It doesn't sit 100% on the base. There's some sort of trim that's supposed to go around the edge here based on what those clips are doing there, hanging out. So pass. I don't deal 1969 Glorias all the time, so I couldn't tell you what's supposed to be on there, but something. But other than that, I mean, that's pretty satisfactory, I reckon. Just in case you were curious about my comments, Ari, the foam in the seat, it is literally raining out of the bottom of the seat. If you put it in and give it a wriggle around, it's totally falling to pieces. So it's something that the owner might have to deal with later on. If he wants a really nice car, it's not going to be ideal with all that foam powdering like sawdust into the carpet and everything every time the car's driven. That's the joys of things that were built so many moons ago. There we go. Basic mod done. Behind there, it's just a little section of frame removed so that back edge sits on top of those bosses, covers, whatever we want to call them. Just going, look at this. Where is it? That's MIG wire. That's that dodgy repair that was done on the car by whoever. Look at how many times red hot molten steel has touched against the corner of this rear seat after some of it's been through the seatbelt. So that was an awesome repair. So anyone who says that what I've just done just there is dodgy, you don't know dodgy. Alright, keep going with some other stuff. So I just spent about an hour getting a screw that was stuck on the other side of the firewall up in there, getting that undone so I could get a panel undone so I could pass these plugs here through that panel hole and extract the wiring harness that normally lives up inside here, pull it out, have a good look at it. In general, it doesn't look too bad. We do want to run a couple more wires through there, and we might need to replace some of them anyway for various reasons, but oops, we lost our focus. Where's our focus gone? That'll do. That's not a good sign. It was a good thing that I pulled this out. I think that's just an earth anyway, but that is actually exposed copper wire, and that whole area there has been exposed to a lot of heat for some reason. So yeah, good reason to whip it all out and have a look at it. Remove what wires we don't need anymore, replace the smaller wires that need to be bigger and all that sort of carry on, and maybe even shift a few things around. There's a couple of relays and stuff. There's one down there hanging off there that could be somewhere else rather than in the engine bay. As I've said earlier, we want to try and keep this whole area in here as clean and tidy as possible. Yep, more fun and games. There's lots of that on this job. Now that's cool. What I've done is eliminated what we don't need from the back end here. There was a massive wiring harness, many more wires than that. So eliminated what we don't have to have for the rear. Figured out some of the wires. This is to do with the alarm. That's a wire for the switch on the boot lid. There's a couple of wires that run to the front here for speakers. There'll be some wires that need to run from the new stereo that's going to be up there somewhere to the back to run the amplifiers. There'll be some RCA cables. There'll be all sorts of things. So I'm starting a bit of a list of what needs to go back to there, what needs to go from this side over here to over there. There's all sorts of things like the ignition sense, the start sense, the 5-volt power supply for the pedal position sensor, the grounds and the signals. I'll take a brake switch signal and a clutch switch signal across over to here. We might be able to make cruise control work. Might as well if we can. Certainly going to have a crack. There's that loud noise again. Going to have a crack at traction control definitely, because this thing's going to be loose otherwise. So yep, heaps to do. Not today though. Time for cold drink and get into it tomorrow. Carry on with all this stuff. It's going to be fun and games. I'll probably run through the whole lot, literally wire by wire, make sure we don't have any chafing or cracking or burnt wires as I showed you earlier on. Don't really want to replace the entire wiring harness on the car if we don't have to, but we'll look at what we need to do and get on with it. Right, so while the harnesses are getting jiggy with it in there in the car, I just had a message from our guy Bruce at Mag and Turbo here in Hamilton, who's helping us out. These 275s don't really fit in the back of the car without tweaking the chassis a little bit. We can't just tap the hammer to get that sorted. We have to do things properly. It's probably easier to get rid of the 275s, put 265s on there. These 275s are just marginally wider than the 275s that we had from Achilles. You can't actually see it in the image here. It makes it look like the inset from the, narrower than the wheel, but they're not. They actually poke out a little bit, and that's where the issue's coming from. They're literally like 7 or 8 millimeters wider than what the Achilles ones were, and that's causing a problem in this car because things are so damn tight. So we're going to get these off, swap them for 265s. It'll be problem solved. So that's awesome, and I really appreciate your help, Bruce and Yokohama. You guys have got us out of a bind, so that's awesome. Right, I'll stop talking, get this off and get them down to Bruce. All the wiring of the car scattered across the bench here. So obviously that's the dash, and that's the harness that goes in behind the dash, right? And this is the this piece that you see here is the harness that ran up in the inside of this guard through the firewall just there, across there. So the main power wire, this puppy here, that supplies all the power into the inside of the car from the engine bay via the battery and everything, had a lovely little join on it. So we'll talk about the plug in a second. This soldering here was onto this piece of wire here, and it was, I'll say it was making contact, and I'll use that term very loosely. It was sat there like that, right? So I pulled the insulation tape off. Yes, it was insulation tape. It wasn't heat shrink, and it wasn't crimped or anything nice like that. So I took the insulation tape off, and it just fell apart. So that was cool. That's the main power. Don't worry about this plug here. I'll have to do something with that too. God damn it. So that's the main power supply for everything that runs inside the car. And then the next thing on that is this Royal Choice plug here. It's a 2-pin plug. Obviously wasn't really rated for the amperage that was going through it. So they've cleverly put a little jumper across there to make the plug handle the power supply. And one of those, this end here I think it is, was just can't quite do it by hand. Might be another one, might be another plug the same. No, pretty sure it's that one. It's just jammed in there. It's not actually crimped on there. If you put a screwdriver in there and just give it a flick, it comes out. So they're just relying purely on the physical contact. And then there's another, this joint's significantly better. Sorry about the focus. That was significantly better, but not really good enough. So I'm glad I decided to get this far into it, because I mean, that contact there, that's enough to start a fire, or at least to cause the poor old link ECU to throw an absolute spaz if it's getting voltage spikes and all sorts of things going on, because the alternator won't be operating correctly. Yep, so anyway, keep going. There's heaps more to do. This is a real old school relay to run the headlights in that. Really old school. Not sure you can even get those anymore, so I might even look at replacing that while we're at it. Just modernise it a little bit. I'd really love to put LED headlights in it. Would be awesome. 5 3/4 inch, if anyone does those that are road legal in New Zealand, that'd be nice to hear from you. That dodgy ass soldering joint is now gone. Kind of left that same plug that they had installed, left that there. Obviously new terminals inside it, ran same size wire on both sides all the way through. It goes back to one wire over here somewhere, and then goes into the plug with a new piece of wire. So that's that sorted out. This plug here, it's she done. She pretty old, falling to pieces. Like I could just smash that with my hand if I pushed hard enough. So Deutsch connector in there instead. Unfortunately that's a 9-pin, and so this is a 12 because I didn't want to run 2 plugs in there. That gives us 3 pins to run some extra wires through that harness if we choose to, so that's alright. A lot of other crap to fix like this. At some stage obviously the plug that's in here has failed. They haven't put a new plug in there, they've used a second-hand one from somewhere, and so then they've used pigtails and soldered on there, and their insulation tape's all falling off, and rubbish job. So I've got to figure out where the plug is, the best spot for the plug rather. If we can put it down here, what I'll do is I'll cut all these off, put some new terminals on there, put them directly into the plug, shift the plug down here, and then put a longer pigtail with a better join on here. I can't, don't want to take this thing apart to solder new wires into here. That might be the better way to do it 100%, but if we muck around soldering that, we could damage contacts inside and cause other problems. So there's a lot of fun to carry on things like that all the way through this whole harness. There's all sorts of just stuff and things. Oh, it's good fun. Good fun. Yeah, so the spaghetti saga was going to continue for a few days yet. That Deutsch connector, 12-pin one, managed to take a couple of wires out of that so we could drop that back down to an 8-pin, which is a little bit smaller, a little bit nicer. few of those wires we don't need anymore. We're going to, anything extra that needs to go into the engine bay, we'll actually run it across from down here is basically where the link ECU is going to be, and there's a hole in the firewall and this general area in relation to the dash. Right, so that's the driver's side, that's the passenger side. There's a hole over here, and that's where that harness down there in the middle of the frame, just below the regulator, that's where that harness pops through there. So things like the windscreen washer motor, which is behind the supercharger there, or supercharger, we'll run the harness for that through there, rather than coming down under this guard through the hole in the front here, back through that hole at the bottom by that pump, along the chassis rail, up the firewall and across the firewall, which is what the factory did. We'll just have it pop out through there, and it'll be part of the engine harness, which will be a bit tidier. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff to deal with. There's a lot of figuring out the wiring for the bulbs and stuff, warning lights. These ones here, I'll actually run the oil pressure warning light straight off the link ECU, because we've got a pressure sensor. Might be able to see it, might not. It's down there somewhere. So we can actually read the pressure and then put a setting in the link ECU to turn the light on when the pressure's too low while the engine's running. Yeah, this plug here is not particularly happy as well. And there's a lot of wires that we don't need on that anymore, so that might actually get replaced with a little 6-pin Deutsch connector, which would be a lot nicer and newer and less prone to failing. We got our 265. Excuse the hoist in front of the screen there. 265 30 19, much more flush with the outside of the wheel. Fits the car a lot better. We will have to replace the Savage Performance and Spares. There's a logo there somewhere. There you go, Bradley. There's a logo. We'll have to replace those 20mm spaces with 25mm spaces to bring the wheel out from the chassis a little bit. There's actually quite a lot of clearance between that and the guard, so we won't rub on the outside, and it'll clear the inside, and it'll be problem solved. I can get on with making a couple of bushes on the front of those lower suspension arms and blah blah blah. Heaps to do. And then once all the spaghetti's all sorted out inside here and all the mounts are all figured out and mounted the ECU in there and put the handbrake handle in there and closed in this and put a cover and built a console to go in between where the handbrake and the gear lever and the bottom of the dash is, once all that's done, we might be able to look at putting some paint on some things. Probably have a yarn with our certifier so he can have a look at everything before it gets any paint on it. Alright. It goes on and on and on, doesn't it? That's going to look really cool in there when that's all finished. Yeah, it's going to look awesome. Alright, cheers for watching. Cheers, bye.